Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Sloppy Lab. I am JT Russell, and here tonight with the man who, for science, stacked 3,457 amber on top of an evil Chapman, and then, wouldn't you know it, had the audacity to ship it across the table with Whirlpool.
True story. True story. It was a very evil move. I regret nothing.
No regrets, as they say. No regrets. Or regrets? I forget which one it is.
Regrets. Yes, no
Regrets.
regrets.
No
Yeah.
regrets. hmm How's it
Uh,
going, Quick Draw?
yeah. I'm pretty good this evening. I'm pretty sweaty still. Um, just had some evil Chapman Whirlpool action for the ABR Exchange League. And it was an excellent match versus Dinobot. But I had to take a shower right afterwards. I was super sweaty. Super
You
sweaty.
you must be. I said this jokingly to you at the time, but it was 100% true. So I missed the start of your match. My daughter had a violin recital at a restaurant, which was kind of fun, fun venue. And there we got there. They said, "Oh, it's going to be a 45-minute wait for your table." And then they started like half an hour late, and then we ate our meal. And mind you, like you started playing when we put our name down for like getting a table, and when I got home at the end of the night, you were still going.
Yeah. This is a familiar story. If Fudginator is out there, I have a similar story from Kagi last season when I was playing the same deck, the Whirlpool Evil Chapman deck, and I forget who the opponent was at the time, but Murph popped in for game one, watched a little bit of it, had to leave. I don't know, I told him he does like I don't know whatever Canadians do, like he went snowshoeing or ice fishing or something like that.
hmm hmm
Gone for a very long time. He came back and it was the second game, but it was like literally an hour and a half later. And that game that he came back in the middle of was like, how is this match still going? He's like, is this game three? And we're like, no, this is game two. Was the middle of a 44 turn Whirlpool game. It was awesome, and I'm just very thankful that my opponent, and I apologize for forgetting who it was in that case because I did have a lot of games with Tessius last year. My opponent was a huge, awesome sport about it, enjoyed every second of it. Not everyone does, but I was
hmm
thankful they did because that was a really memorable game.
hmm I think you enjoy the like psychological standoff games. Where you're like standing
what are you
there,
what are you trying to
like
say about me?
who's gonna draw first. It's like who's gonna blink. I like it. Um,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah.
definitely a game of chicken.
Game of chicken, game of hot potato for sure. We've played some whirlpool games with Tessius, and this deck does feature Evil Chapman, which is probably a discard in every single other deck that features Evil Chapman. But this one has a whirlpool.
Yeah. So he's like the best card ever. Literally, game two in this match, I was playing at game two and three. I held Chapman the entire game in both of them. Never discard him. Like, just waiting for the right time, and sure enough, the right time will come.
Yeah, and this I've got the decks pulled up here for folks to look at too, but there are a few pretty spicy things to ship with Whirlpool. So you've got Evil Chapman, Evil Cowp, which is another card that folks don't see very often and may also discard frequently. But that can really hamstring folks. Um, some capture, um, but those are really
Yeah,
the marquee cards of the deck to ship across the
yeah.
table. hmm
So the reason we're talking about this tonight, in case you're wondering, like, what the heck does Tessios have to do with anything at all, is we're here tonight to talk about Exchange, which is a lesser known format. It is embraced by ABR still, at least in the playoffs. I'm a big fan of the format. Um, and so JT and I are going to talk about that. We'll give you an overview on the format. But I just came out of the ABR playoff match versus Dinobot in the exchange. And Dinobot streamed the whole thing. If you missed it, you can go back and watch it. Excellent three-game series between he and I. He recorded it over on twitch.tv/dinobot333, I believe is the page.
hmm
Fact checkers.
Yeah.
Yeah? Okay. JT says yeah.
I drop a link in the chat too.
So, had a great match. Concludes my ABR season. Ended on a high note for me. A lot of fun. But we knew that this match was coming up, and we've been talking about exchange for a long time. It's not. I did not stutter. We have been talking about exchange, and we're finally going to do it tonight. We thought this was a good time for it, with the end of ABR coming around, and it's a very cool format if you haven't heard of it. So hopefully you guys enjoy it and get something out of this.
Yeah, and I maybe ask you to give us the rundown on how the format works in a second, but I I think we had exchange on our brainstorming list of topics basically since we started.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think we did. Like Newton was one of the first ones we talked about. I think that was episode one, and exchange was on the list. I think since that same time, we've been wanting to talk about it for a while.
Mm-hmm.
What is this, episode 43 now?
43, 43. So yeah, major congrats, and also gives us an opportunity to I don't know, make the iron is hot. You've heated the iron, and we're gonna strike. You know,
I
so
heated the iron with my sweat
with
in
your
that
sweat.
game I just played.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Um, Also, funny connection there between how sweaty I got that game and how Evil Chapman looks exactly like Sweaty Zach.
Oh my.
Have you ever seen this? There's a recreation out there of Zach Armstrong posing as Evil Chapman, and it's just dead on. It's unbelievable.
I think I have seen that. Yeah, it
Yeah,
is uncanny.
very. All right, are you ready to talk some exchange for real? Are we gonna get into this?
Yes, please. And I apologize, a little frog in my throat, but we'll carry on. Nothing if not sloppy. So yeah, tell us about the format, how it works, and then maybe we'll get into a little bit about deck selection and other things too.
All right. So first, I'm going to give a shout out. This format, we believe the origins come from Discord user Pixie Dust, who came up with this idea on the Keyforge Lounge server. It was in December 2021. They just calmly asked, has anyone ever played a format before where you bring two decks and you take one from your opponent and then you play a best of three? And everyone's like, no, I don't think so. So thus was born Exchange. One other user I would be remiss for mentioning, Gaxico, claims that they may have also independently come up with that a few years prior, just hadn't really played it widely. So um, credit where credit's due to those two users. So the rules of the format, as I said, you bring two decks, any decks you want, and you review them against your opponent at the beginning of the match. You each secretly choose one to steal, and then you play a best of three where you have to win with each of the two decks, the one of the ones you brought and the one that you stole. So there is some gamesmanship involved about what are they going to steal from me? How do I play these matchups? Um, and the most interesting thing to me is that you have to know the matchup between your own two decks because they are pretty likely to have to play each other one time during the match. And that's interesting because a lot of people, myself included, except in extremely rare circumstances, do not play our own decks against each other. And
Mm-hmm.
so it's a different kind of muscle that you have to exercise, I think, to play exchange. You have to really understand your matchups and very specific deck matchups as well, and the counterplay involved with those. So, super interesting format, super difficult format. We'll try to get into the nuts and bolts of it here.
Yeah, super difficult, and it's funny too because you think about all the decks that exist out there being a unique deck game. The only decks that you're not going to face are the ones that you also own in a tournament setting, and this kind of turns that on its head, right? Like, actually, no, you're going to be able to guarantee an opponent. So very cool, and I think I don't know. I might make the claim that this is a format that rewards knowing your own decks even more than best of three adaptive.
Yeah, I think so.
Hmm.
I think I'd have a hard time arguing that. Um, this is a just kind of a brain burner of a format. Um, it's been in ABR, I think the last two seasons at least, maybe a little bit longer than that. Time Shapers has run one of these as well. Um, and there's always lots of theory crafting going on. Like, what decks do I bring? Should I bring two good decks, two weak decks, two decks of like a very high discrepancy in SAS, where you just know the matchups? There's so many different theories around that, and I think to kind of cut to the chase a little bit, it's a very complex like thought process, but you essentially, what the format comes down to is you need to win the matchup between the weakest decks. And when I say weakest decks, we have to also like take that with a grain of salt, because you're never going to have linear matchups in Keyforge where one beats two and two beats three and three beats four, and everything wins down the line. You're going to have this rock, paper, scissors, like we've talked about in the past, where not everything is going to be, a perfect line like that. It's going to be a little bit more circular. So it really rewards knowing the matchups. But in theory, if you know the matchup between the two weakest decks and you win that matchup, theoretically you should win the match. Now, um, that kind of implies you should bring weaker decks. Um, in fact, maybe even you could say that you have an advantage if you bring the weaker decks, which is the complete opposite of what you could say theoretically in adaptive, where you want to bring the best deck, because if you win game one and lose game two, you get the choice of going first in game three, which is a pretty good advantage in adaptive. So it kind of turns it on its head a little bit. And then the aspect of like not knowing what your opponent's going to steal from you
Mm-hmm.
really just adds another wrinkle, and it just makes it so hard to prepare for. Like you can do all the preparation you want with your own decks, and you just don't know what your opponent's going to bring or steal.
Yeah, and I don't know. I almost thought the exact opposite of that when first looking at the format, because when you look at this choice, right, it's like I can either know the matchup between the weakest decks, or I can force my opponent to play with the weakest deck of the four, right? That's kind of the other take. So I could say, well, I'm just going to bring decks that are really strong and say, okay, quick draw. Tonight, this match is going to come down to the head to head between your decks. Um, and I'm going to try to stick you with the worst of the two. So I kind of came into this saying, like, you know what? If I'm better at evaluating than preparing, then maybe there's an advantage to be claimed by just going over the top and then trying to stick you with the squeaky wheel, as it were. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and I feel like a number of people kind of had this similar thought when we first started playing it, and it didn't take too many tournaments for folks to kind of converge on, like, well, maybe actually there is a real advantage, more of an advantage to having familiarity in the matchup that is kind of among the weaker decks that are brought to bear. So that was cool. That was cool to see, and it didn't take really long for folks to converge on that. But that kind of runs hand in hand or counter to how, depending on your perspective, this notion that folks don't really play their decks against their own decks against each other that often. I guess unless you're and among the Nordics love to do it. I don't know. It's a Nordic thing. A lot of solo
Apparently, Murph does
tournaments.
it.
Murph does it. Okay.
Fudginator says solo tournaments for the win. Maybe it's maybe it's something that people that live in cold climates do.
I mean, Maine's pretty chilly. I don't know. We'll see. But yeah, so maybe. Uh, but yeah, really interesting to see that. But even the folks who are tending to play their own decks against each themselves, I don't think tend to do it with their weakest decks, right? Um,
Hmm.
so
That is
that
true.
that maybe then leaves you sort of in a middle ground among the decks that you feel more comfortable with, but are probably not going to overshoot your opponent's decks too often. And I feel like very often we see things kind of in that nice mid range on power level, which is pretty cool too, I'd say. Ooh.
Yeah. So the two decks you're showing here, the decks that I played in my exchange match tonight, are what I would describe as like middle of the road in power level. They both can really like punch well above their weight, but they can also lose depending on the matchup as well to almost anything. So if we look back at like what your initial approach was that you were talking about, where
Mm-hmm.
you want to plan on being the better at evaluating the deck and sticking your opponent with the weakest deck, I think the flaw in that is that you are assuming that your opponent brought two decks where one of them is disadvantaged.
Mm-hmm.
And I one rule I have with tournaments and gaming in general is that I never assume that my opponent will make a mistake. And I think that's kind of what that's leaning into. And so you can get away with that, I think, if your opponent lets you. But I think when I approach exchange, I have to approach it with the mindset that they are going to bring two decks that are evenly matched, that have a chance against each other no matter which side, and they are going to have the advantage from knowing those decks, whether
Mm-hmm.
they are stronger decks or weaker decks. And so, kind of like leads to the next question of like, why don't you just bring like two reversal caliber decks that you just know really well? Well, part of the reason that I brought these two decks that are middle and power level is that I want to have a chance at winning in two games. I don't want there to be a meaningless game where it's like the best deck in Keyforge versus my reversal deck. It's just kind of a waste of time. Um, and I like to bring a deck that has strengths and weaknesses that I know and understand, but it can also win if you play the cards right. And also, it can win if you evaluate your opponent's decks and steal the one that you think best takes advantage. And you could also get into like game theory about like which one do I think they're going to take? Am I going to take like defensively? And then you think, well, like maybe they're expecting me to take this one and maybe they'll switch it up. So there's like so many complexities going on in not a banning process, but like the stealing process, where there's definitely some mind games that you and your opponent can play with each other.
Hmm. So, when you say you're bringing something middling because you want, or not kind of reversal caliber because you want to have a chance to win in two, is that mostly for enjoyment, or because you think it gives you the best chance from a competitive standpoint? In other words, are you saying like, you know what, I'm not min maxing to the max here, like kind of going somewhat for fun?
Yeah, it's a good question, and it's hard for me to answer that honestly. I think it's a little bit of both. And if I had to be honest, I'd say I think it leans a little bit more towards the like the fun factor,
Hmm.
um, with the caveat that I think exchange is a really underexplored format where I don't think everybody has come to the consensus that yes, I should bring weaker decks. And so I kind of don't expect people to bring 50 SAS caliber decks. I still expect people to bring 70s, maybe 80s. Dino brought a few 80s today.
Hmm.
So um, it's sort of like hedging my bet a little bit. Like I know these two decks can win against stuff in the 80s in the right matchup, and so I want to give myself that chance to do that. And also, you don't want to leave yourself in a situation where like it is just a single game. Like you want to try to like have a little bit of control over your destiny because if it is just a single game, then this is Keyforge. You can get a bad draw and you can lose the matchup. I came dangerously close to losing game three when Dinobot had an amazing untamed turn with Chelonia and two Deepwater Runes and a Witch of the Dawn. Um, I thought that was actually it. Like that kind of stuff can happen. Like you and I actually played this matchup between these two decks a couple days ago in
Hmm.
preparation. And I played with Guadalupe and I couldn't quite get that untamed rush going. And Dinobot got it and almost came in with the win. But in both of the games that Dinobot and I played, and the games that you and I played, Tessius, the evil twin, won both times.
Hmm. Hmm. And we should be paying Zoc royalties for the This is Keyforge. We certainly get a lot of mileage out of it on the team server too.
Love it. I love it. Data Forge stream. Um, yeah, it's very apt, and it's just good to think about. Like you can lose a game to luck, and you can get really upset about it. But like why get upset? This is Keyforge. This is the game we love. Sometimes things go your way, sometimes they don't, and that's kind of why we love it.
Yeah, totally. And I think there's something too. I mean, you can say that, well, I want three real games because it's more fun than hinging on one game. But I think there's absolutely something to be said for, from a competitive standpoint. I don't want it to hinge on a single high roll, right?
Yeah,
Like I think that's very fair. And I mean, I think for that same reason, it's good and not just more fun when adaptive decks are roughly in the same ballpark, right? You kind of don't want it to be just on a game with high chains. You want each of the games to be kind of mattering toward the end result in like a real way, right? Yeah,
yeah. I mean,
totally.
you do see sometimes in adaptive when there is such a large discrepancy that someone might just concede early just to not give up any trade secrets, so to speak. I don't generally do that, but like you could also make the case to do that in exchange. Like because you're playing two games, and if I know I'm going to lose a game, maybe I don't give up all the secrets about how to play against evil Chapman um, the first time around. But we ended up having three close games, and yeah, I'm not a huge proponent of that sort of sandbagging type strategy in these kind of matches.
Yeah, totally. Interesting. Well, these are very interesting decks. They're both very difficult to play, which I think makes
Yeah,
them strong candidates for the format as well. I don't know. That's probably something that you were looking for specifically too. I mean,
yeah,
yeah.
100%. Yeah.
Hmm.
I This is the second round of the playoffs in ABR. So like the first round, I chose the two exchange decks that I'm most accustomed to. I play them in every exchange event that I play in, and it's done really well for me. They're like low 60s. One's a Mass Mutation, one's a Worlds Collide Brobnar actually. And then when I won last week, I had to find a different pair, and it's like we said, it's very hard to know like what to bring. These happen to be two decks that I'm pretty familiar with. They each have some pretty glaring weaknesses, some bad matchups, and yeah, I think it worked out for me. I'm probably gonna keep this in my exchange arsenal for quite a while.
It was a fun one. I did pick Tessius, the Korean deck, I think, um, when given the choice. So interesting. Dinobot chose Guadalupe,
Hmm.
which I think. So I've played Tessius a number of times. I've played Guadalupe a number of times too. I think Guadalupe's high rolls are going to be very difficult for Tessius to deal with, 100%.
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
I don't know. I wonder, Guadalupe may have more chances to punch up also when the Evil Chapman Whirlpool line isn't good against their two decks. Maybe.
It's tough to say. They both can. I've definitely punched up super high with Tessius, and a lot of it comes down to do they have the artifact control, and do they have a lot of amber pips? Like a lot of um, a lot of decks that you face, especially in adaptive, tend to want bigger boards, and I think Guadalupe, you kind of like fall into this trap. Like you know the whirlpool's coming, and you can assume that it's coming with Chapman, but that Chelonia and two Deepwater Groons and the Witch of the Dawn is so tempting. Like, how do you pass that up? And I think that's part of the trick here is like knowing if that's the right call. And Dinobot, I don't think made a mistake. I think he rushed hard, and I happened to have a couple of the answers to stall and time to find the Chapman. But those are the kind of difficult questions that you kind of have to ask, like in a matchup with decks like these.
Hmm.
Like 18 pips in Guadalupe should be enough to get it done if you just discard your creatures. Take away those two Deepwater Runes, you still have 14 pips, which is still more than Tessius offers. So that's one approach you can take. But a lot of the amber control outside of the submersive principle comes in the form of like Eddy, Mookling, Valmart. So you can't just always discard that stuff if they happen to have like a decent burst on you.
Hmm. Interesting. Yeah, it's tough. I mean, and looking at these decks, right? It's like there's a lot going on in both of them, and it's really hard to see the strategic interplay from a glance, from like a 5 minute read, right? And I think that's one of the things that I like about them, and one of the things that I like about adaptive best of one decks, especially too. Um, you know, looking at them, okay, SAS actually rates the arc in Guadalupe lower than the arc in Tessius, which is surprising to me because in my mind, Guadalupe has better cards on average than Tessius.
Yeah, it's interesting.
I don't know if you would agree with that, knowing both better than I would. But when I think of Guadalupe, I think of overall card quality as being higher than on Tessius' side.
I do too. I never actually noticed that before about the arc scores in these two decks. But
Mm.
yeah, it has tons of great things like the Chelonia, the two Groons, the two Eddies, the Mechabui. Um, yeah, it does seem like it has more just like straight up value, but that's interesting. And
Mm.
Dinobot has joined the chat. Dinobot, I just want to say that was a super fun match, super well played against the Whirlpool. I know you were kind of lamenting at first how I would do something so treacherous, like give these two decks. Um, but you played it super well. It was a lot of fun, and I'm looking forward to going to watch your stream, rewatch it later this week.
Dinobot, I'm on a team with this guy. Like, do you know my pain? I practice these matchups.
The torture that you guys go through.
The pain's real. The pain is real.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, all right. So, how do you how do you find like balanced decks to bring in this format? Like, because like we said, there's not a whole lot of times that you um, practice this stuff,
Hmm.
and I don't practice this much either. So it's hard to just look at two decks, even two decks that you know, and understand how they're going to play against each other.
Yeah.
Is there any
I
strategies you think of?
I think the best strategy, honestly, is to have a friend and have your exchange lineup be one of your decks and one of their decks. Um,
Hmm,
hopefully one like a matchup that you've played with a friend a lot, right? Like let's
that's a
say
really good idea.
I've got a favorite deck, you've got a favorite deck, and we've played each other a lot, and eventually we found a deck from my collection and a deck from your collection that produce good games that go either way. So I think I mean I suggested one to you, which was Garvey and Rector, and I suggested that because Not Tonight and I have played that matchup a handful of times and
Hmm.
mostly split them. Mostly split them. I guess we've split them. Mostly split sounds weird. um, but yeah, so it's an interesting matchup, and I think that's a great way to find decks that are balanced because yeah, unless you are playing the solo tournaments, you probably don't have a ton of experience, and then even knowing where to start can be really tough. Um, my go to lineup for exchange, um, I found it by starting with a deck that I knew was good and that I enjoyed playing, but not crazy strong. So something sort of a baseline of familiarity, and then kind of went looking for decks that I also knew in my collection that were around the same power level, and really kind of tried to deep think around what they were doing as far as game plans go. And I have them here maybe to illustrate this better. But I started this one with Green Wasp, Fist of the Rock. Is a sort of a SAS cap favorite of mine. It comes in at 67, and it's got double tribute and double six semper, um, and is just a monster of a deck, especially at this SAS range. Very capable of gobbling up all of your opponent's amber and siphoning through six semper via those tributes. Um, but as I was kind of like thinking about this deck and what it does, it's like, hey, all of this amber control is creature based. Uh, and so if I have a way of kind of mitigating your creatures for a turn uh, and maybe attacking through another vector that Green Wasp doesn't really handle well, then I can make an interesting matchup. So uh, I think most people, when looking at this uh, matchup, will rightly assess that Green Wasp is just the better deck in a vacuum. Um, but Deirdre
That's what I would
events,
have said.
yeah, and you're not wrong. That's absolutely true. Yeah, against an open field, Green Wasp is a stronger deck than the other one I'm showing, which is Deirdre Events Rook, which is a 63 SAS deck um, that features an Epic Quest, two Spirits Way, Hysteria, and a Life Ward. And the Life Ward in particular is very important in this matchup because of the reason that Green Wasp's um, Amber Control is all creature based, right? So you can follow up an Hysteria or a Spirit's Way with a Life Ward, and it's essentially a key cheat. Um,
Hmm.
and Also, kind of Green Wasp doesn't have a way to interact with the Epic Quest. So there's almost two free keys up for grabs in Deirdre if you navigate it well. And I've played this matchup a handful of times now too. Uh, Deirdre has won an awful lot. That's won an awful lot of them. It's more
Yeah.
like 60-40, not like it's wild swing. And I've had to play the Green Wasp side of this too. Um, but yeah, a note from that chat too. Power of Fire, my man. This are the best two Power of Fires that I've seen printed yet. So Green Wasp also includes two Power of
Hmm.
Fires, but it's alongside double Pterodactyl and double Titan Guardian. So often the Titan Guardian will wear what is the upgrade? Where is the upgrade? Fire Breath. Throw that Fire Breath on your Titan Guardian. Draw some cards. Crush some Amber. Great
Yeah.
powers of fires. Yeah, but
Interesting that you mentioned Power of Fire because one of my original lineups for Exchange, Kennard Crow, is a Worlds Collide deck with Brobnar. It has a Brobnar too much to protect, but it also has a Power of Fire that can do some serious work with a Garganodon in there. Interesting that we both actually like Power of Fire in this format.
I mean, it kind of speaks to. Uh, I mean, I think when you're playing against some stronger players, like tactics aren't enough, right? You're not gonna be like, oh, did they miss that I could connect six Sempert and Tribute? Probably not. But I think things like Life Ward and Spirit's Way combining to essentially ensure a key uh, will often go unnoticed. And even if it doesn't go unnoticed, it's hard to judge how important or valuable that is to the end result, how much of an impact that's going to make in the end result. Even something like the Epic Quest. The Epic Quest in this deck is very consistent, very consistent. And I think it's
Hmm.
super hard to look at an Epic Quest deck and know just from a quick read how consistent that Epic Quest is going to fire, how consistently it will fire.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you've got three lab works, and you've got also to archive, you have the backup copy, and you have a Hexpion, and you have a Eureka. So that's a lot of archiving right off the start. The Hysteria also can aid it if you have a few Sanctum
Mm-hmm.
creatures out and you pop them back to hand. Um, and I love that this deck, Deirdre has the Dysania against Green Wasp
Yes.
because Green Wasp might feel like they've got some extra speed and efficiency, and they've got two Tau Vapors, they've got a Jargogle. Um, and so you can kind of, it really puts you on your heels a little bit with Green Wasp. Like you want to archive a few things, maybe like the Six Emperor and the Tribute, but Deirdre does not let you do that with the Dysania. And so you maybe have to pull your archives faster than you might think. Just use it for like a single turn of efficiency, and not really expose yourself or your important cards to the Dysania.
Totally, and that's a huge thing, and also super hard to evaluate from a read. I mean, okay, Green Wasp does have some archiving. It's got the double Tau Tau and Jargoggle for a pinch archiving. Yep. But yeah, hard to think through like, well, how much of a speed bump is that Dysania to Green Wasp, and it's significant. There's some cool tricks too. The backup copy actually combos super well with Wild Wormhole. Really fun. So you can play that Dysania out, throw the backup copy on it, fight into something, Wild Wormhole it back into play. Really fun to do. Yeah.
Backup copy is such a good card. Really interesting plays that you can get with that. In AOA, there's just so many like little things that let you draw a card in logos that you may not think about, and just putting the backup copy on something like a Helper Bot or a Dysania can be
Hmm.
a real game changer and kind of come out of nowhere. Very cool card.
Totally. And so I guess to circle way back to your question, we took a very roundabout answer. Like this was not, oh, I've jammed a bunch of my decks against each other and found a good matchup. This was a top down, like I thought about the strengths and weaknesses of a deck that I wanted to play, and kind of went through the mental catalog of some of my favorites and tried to find one that fit into that deck's strengths and weaknesses in an interesting way. And I think this kind of does it. Even if you really deep think about these two decks, it's hard to play out like which one nets out better most often. And it's a close matchup. I'd say it's 60-40 at best. And yeah, I've had to play either side, and I'm pretty happy having to play either side, and feel like if there is a delta, it's maybe made up by the familiarity. Um,
Hmm.
yeah.
Yeah, it goes a long way. I mean, I would probably, if I were playing Deirdre without hearing you talk about this, I probably wouldn't have noticed the all the Amber Control being in creature based. I have a couple decks like that, and I know them. And you look at it, and you're like, man, that looks like a lot of creature control, or sorry, a lot of Amber Control. And then when you're playing it, you realize, oh my god, I don't have a board, I can't do anything. And that's such an advantage to know that and to time your life word for that. I would probably get a little antsy with the life word and want to just pop it for value a little bit sooner. But you're right, like that could be a total game changer right there.
It can. And I played. I had one match, one very memorable match with these two in an exchange event against Karen, and Karen's such a great player. She was on Green Wasp and I was on Deirdre, and I had the Life Ward out and was holding the Spirit's Way. Trying to get to a point where I could clear the board and then use the Life Ward, and she was fighting tooth and nail to keep um, a creature under 2 power alive just to be able to tribute onto it, um, post
Yeah.
the board wipe. And it was just like, it was just really really cool, really interesting to like see that we both got what the sub game was that we were playing, uh, and kind of how the positioning was working around it. Like, okay, the ward was hitting the bibliophile or the jar goggle, and the taunts were protecting them, and yeah, maybe to more so than some of the better targets. So cool, very really cool to see.
Yeah. Very interesting. Um, so do you think that this is an improvement on like the bring whatever deck you want type of formats that are out there? Because like there's always like the age old question in Keyforge, like I just want a format that I can bring any deck that I want. You could have your favorite deck from Coda or from AOA maybe, and it doesn't survive an Archon. It's not good enough for Triad. Um, you know, people want to be able to play whatever deck they have. Like there was this promise from the start of Keyforge of like you only need one deck. Do you think Exchange, well, needing two decks, I guess, for Exchange, do you think that this kind of lives up to that type of format where you can just have almost anything? You could have a tiny collection and still be able to compete?
I think it is playing in that space, and that's one of the reasons why I really like the format. Like, I really like the format. I think it is a format where without any deck can be part of an of a top tier competitive lineup, right? Any deck can, paired with the right other deck, right? Paired with the right other deck, any deck could be a top tier competitive contender. I don't think it's trivial to find a great match, and doubly so or exponentially so when you have a smaller collection. Like, I don't think this is a format that's necessarily small collection friendly in the way that adaptive best of three is, right? So, purely from a standpoint of making the game more accessible, making the competitive end of the game more accessible, I wouldn't call it an improvement, but I think it's perhaps more skill testing and rewarding than even adaptive best of three. So I guess it depends a little bit what you're looking for. Um, yeah, there's an answer and a non-answer, but well, I don't know. What's your take?
I don't think it's quite an improvement because, like we said earlier, there is the incentive to bring the worst decks. And
Mm.
so, with that, like gravity towards one end of the spectrum, it's not quite as good for that regard as adaptive is. Um, I still think it's a good format. I personally really like it. Um, yeah, I wouldn't call it an improvement, but I think it's pretty adequate, and I wish it were more popular. I wish that you could find games with this, more often. But maybe that's on someone like us because you look at other formats like Newton and Time Shapers ran a few Newton leagues for a while, and Fighting Walloon and Murph run Kagi because they want to see adaptive tournaments more often. And then now Karen is running her Morai tournament, her Morai league that's going to be going perpetually. So like we have these great people in the community who say, I like this format. I want to play this format more. I'm going to run a league based on it. And I have tons of respect for that. So, I mean, maybe we could run an exchange league more often, more regularly. I think it is such like a brain burning format, though, which I think is part of the reason why it's not more popular, is that you have this churn of like trying to figure out the optimal play for it. And is that churn really like is that a good exercise or does it just feel like running on a treadmill where you're just like bored and tired by the time you're done?
Well, it is best of three exclusively, so I mean that there's a notch against it for that in that respect, at least for widespread adoption, right? And there's also, I mean, the same folks who are worried that you're going to eat their deck in adaptive are going to worry that you're going to eat their deck in exchange. So you still have to hand a deck across the table and let them
But
shuffle and play. Yeah.
that's not a problem anymore.
Oh, with
Well,
the.
it won't be. You can order your proxy deck straight from Ghost Galaxy, give it to your opponent, and say, "Let's play a game, and afterwards, give me $25 and I'll let you eat the deck." No big deal.
Once when they come out with the flavored cardboard, I'm
Oh,
gonna.
now we're talking.
Now we're talking.
I mean, the smell of like a freshly cracked pack is
Mhm.
pretty appetizing, I must say.
There is a good smell to it. There is a good smell to it, and I'm curious who they went with. So, do you know Quick Draw? Did they print these themselves? Did Ghost Galaxy print these decks themselves?
They had a ton of YouTube videos of them literally printing the decks. Artiforge, I believe they called it.
Mm-hmm.
And I have to think they did print them. I don't know if that's different than how it used to be done. I'm not familiar with the manufacturing process that FFG used.
Hmm. I'm not sure either. Specifically, I think they used a variety of printers. I do collect playing cards as well, so I very much enjoy the scent of a freshly opened deck of cards, and you can definitely tell the difference between, say, a Cardamundi deck versus a United States Playing Card Company deck just by the smell alone, which is pretty fun. Um, Usually more the
Cardamundi is Belgian, is that
Belgian.
right?
Hmm.
And they've
Yeah,
been around for a very long time, right?
yeah, I think they were one of the first Magic the Gathering printers too, I want to say.
Yeah,
But
I was gonna say I
yeah,
think they also printed Star Wars CCG in the mid '90s.
they're big. They're
'Cause
big.
they seem pretty big,
And
and
they
I
were
must say the Cardamundi scent is top notch.
is very nice. Got a nice sweet kind of quality to it. Yeah, will be
Yeah,
this.
lots of memories with that.
Although I don't know if I should tell you this quick draw, but uh, Cardamundi was recently acquired, not so recently, by the United States Playing Card Company, I think. Or was it the other way around? Pretty sure the USPCC acquired Cardamundi. Um, so
So you telling me that I should just like buy random games that are printed by Cardamundi just for the scent and not care about the game?
I'm not going to tell you what to do. I'm just giving you facts, and you can make your own decisions. You
All right,
know.
might have to do some research on that. Maybe I can invest in a game that has a secondary market and
Mhm.
just open it for the smells and sell whatever's inside.
Well, the folks who care a lot about how a deck handles, your magicians, your cardists, and such, get very excited about the card stock and the finish and the paints and what's not that are used. So there was a lot of concern when the acquisition happened that the special sauce that made up the various decks was going to go away.
That was
Uh,
the first thing I thought when you said that Cardamundi was bought out by another company. I was like, well, all good things must die eventually.
I think your that sweet oaky scent is safe for the time being, and maybe there's
Well,
a career as a card sommeliers for us somewhere.
maybe this is a way to inflate the price of the remaining sealed product from Cartamundi.
Oh. Ooh, the Cloggin in the chat saying they have a collection with some herbalists if we want to get some Archon cologne.
Ooh.
I I could
Oh,
forego I could forego the packaging. I'm not particular about these things.
how nerdy and maybe hipster would it be if there was like a Cartamundi cologne that literally smelled like a fresh pack of Cartamundi cards?
You said nerdy and hipster, but all I heard was aphrodisiac.
um, are we talking about exchange still? Like, how did we get here?
I don't know. I think Algernon Honor just walked in without a shirt on. Okay. Anyway,
uh,
back to the topic at hand.
I mean, I swear it's not an indicator of a lack of things to talk about. I feel like we could probably talk about exchange for a while.
Yeah, it's only been on our backlog of topics for 43 weeks.
It was only the 43rd most important thing we could think of.
Hmm. There were
Not that
definitely
bad.
there were definitely weeks where we were like, "Do you have anything you want to talk about this week?" Then we looked at exchange and kind of both looked the other way, like
Yeah.
didn't make eye contact with the exchange. Well,
Yeah.
the reason is not that we didn't want to talk about it. Like we wanted to do it justice and also strike when the iron is hot. And
Yeah.
yeah, so don't want exchange to feel bad. Like we like this format a lot. Well, actually, no.
Yeah.
You answered it a little bit, but do you like this format? Like, would you
I
would
do.
you would you
Yeah.
sign up for an exchange league? Yeah.
Absolutely. I have.
Okay.
I would. Yeah, definitely. I just like being able to play these different decks like Guadalupe and Tessius that we showed earlier. Like they're two of my favorite decks, and I could maybe get away with playing them in. Well, I have played them both in adaptive a lot. Um, they can win in certain matchups. Like if I were trying to get frisky and have some fun, I could play them in a triad, and I feel like I'd have an okay shot if I just play the matchups well. But it's very different, and I like being able to kind of mix things up. And I like playing with the Worlds Collide Brobnar deck, and this is a great format for that. So I do like it, and maybe I could mix it up a little bit more next time and discover some old decks that I haven't played in a while that I really do enjoy still.
Funny that we both gravitated towards Worlds Collide Brobnar decks for our lineups too. Yeah, I like it.
Yeah. I'll drop in the one of the other ones I play in the chat here. It's Canard Crow, and oops, that's the wrong link. That's the Dinobots link. Because I was going to share that earlier. So Dinobot, you got another plug there. And here's the actual deck that I was going to link. Um,
Quick Draw shows us what's on their clipboard at the moment.
man, that's risky. You know what I
Clipboard
mean?
roulette
Like,
from Quick Draw. Yeah.
how many times at work have you like mispasted something, and you're like, wow, thank God that was not something else that I had on my clipboard earlier. Like a Dex of Keyforge link, for example. Um, but in this case, Canard Crow has the beautiful Worlds Collide Brobnar Too Much to Protect, which is a pretty big game changer with the Soul Snatcher out there. Um, Super fun deck. Um, just really enjoy this one uh, in my primary exchange lineup, but like it's something that I wouldn't get to play outside of exchange, really.
Totally, totally. I'm also enjoying a fried chicken scented playing card. Link from the chat. They're joking, but if you watch a deck opening, guarantee you with 80% certainty they will comment on the scent of the cards. Maybe do a big whiff, big sniff for the ASMR value. Yeah, yeah. I guess your deck's a little bit cheating though. It's kind of only 11 Worlds Collide Brobnar cards, instead of
True,
12. Yeah.
true. It still only has a 17 stas in that Brobnar, with 3.5 coming from the Too Much to Protect. So um, let's be real. It's still like it's a less than stellar Worlds Collide Brobnar list. Two War Grumpus, the Power of Fire, which like we talked about, is actually pretty good.
Yeah.
Um, but the Too Much to Protect combos pretty well with the creature control that's in that house.
Hmm. Yeah, that feeling when the first card listed by SAS as highest rated cards in your house is a Maverick.
Yeah, well, um, I have another deck that is also one of my favorite decks. It's a 46 has Stitch of the Oscar. The
Hmm.
dis is insane, and the dis actually accounts for over half of the deck's SAS.
Yeah, yeah. I've played against that deck, and I'm gonna move on before you suggest that we play it in our match later.
I briefly considered bringing it to exchange, and I still might do that in the future. It's such a hilarious deck that is probably really tilting, um, but it's kind of like perfect for exchange. It's a super low SAS. It's got some weaknesses. It's got some discards in it that you don't want to play. It does have probably a little bit higher variance than I would like.
Mhm.
It's all about the disruption. It is about um, three toxins and using them across every house, and a succubus and two ember imps. So like it can really just frustrate the heck out of your opponents. And if the disc goes off, then it's just go to my decks and sort by reverse SAS, and you'll find it.
Is that four mother
Um,
guns? Am I remembering that right?
it has four
Yeah.
mother guns. It's just Stitch.
Stitch. Yeah, I tried Stitcher. Four mother guns was what I found it with though. Yeah. I
Oh, well, I'm telling you, if you just click on the SAS rating, the sort,
is
and click up,
actually your lowest SAS, your
it is
lowest.
actually my lowest SAS deck, and it's fantastic. Um, it is, yeah. I mean, this is a thing of beauty. Two Hysteria, three Toxin, two Ember Imps, and a Succubus, and a Rise for that. So you basically just like use the Hysterias to continue to clog their hand, and then you play the Toxins, and you make them discard everything, and you Hysteria back the creatures they just played, and you play the Toxins again. And then once you're done with that, over like 2 turns or so, you go back into like Sanctum and you play Mantle of the Zealot and three Inspirations or things like that.
Hmm.
It's an extremely ridiculous deck. I'm gonna have to find a good matchup for it for exchange and bring this one along.
I'd be curious to see what you paired with it. Because I mean, it's very capable of punching up when things line up. I
Yeah,
probably would say yeah, it's got a bit of variance, inherent to it, which I don't know, maybe is, maybe isn't what you want in an exchange deck. It makes for interesting decisions in the deck selection process for sure, and the like stealing
Yeah.
process, right? Like, do you go for consistency down the middle, or do you go for the deck that has the high roll? Maybe it depends, but yeah.
hmm We
Hmm.
kind of hinted at this, but like, when you go into any kind of game, you always assume your opponent's not going to make a mistake. But in exchange, what if you came with like Stitch, a 46 SAS deck, and you bring something that's like a 70? Like you're telling me like as the opponent, you're getting linked to two decks of Keyforge decks where one's a 46 and one's a 70. You're not going to think twice about that. Like
Hmm.
that's where the real mind games happen. When you have like a major difference like that, you're like, are you playing with me or do you just not understand this format? Like, and then it's I don't know. You could also say that that could be a strategy. Like if you have that major discrepancy, you're like, I know they're going to pick the 46 to make me play it, and then you use that knowledge to steal the deck that has the best uh, matchup against it, or rather the worst matchup against the other one.
Hmm. Where is that like? Where is the number in your mind where you're like, this is suspicious now? Because, and I'm gonna tell you why. Because I commented that the gap between Guadalupe and Tessius was at least approaching the suspicious range, and you're like, ah, it's not that big, not
No,
much. Yeah,
no, it's not approaching the range for me. It's 5 point difference to those decks. I'd say we're looking at like minimum 8 before I'm suspicious.
but like 5 points,
And
that's like 10, almost 10%, almost a 10%
that's
difference. It's like
that's nothing.
that's nothing. Okay,
I
okay.
mean, if there was a way to hide the SAS score when evaluating, I would do that for myself.
Oh, for sure.
And true story, when I play any Kagi match, I will not look at the decks of Keyforge page of their decks.
Hmm.
Um, I play the decks. I try to understand what's in them because the SAS score and even the ARC scores can really get in your way. Like your brain sees them and assumes something, and it takes a very close analysis to refute that. Especially with things like Perfectus Ludo, which has like a very odd amber control score that sometimes is accurate and sometimes it's just total baloney. And so there's so many little like inconsistencies with that where if you're just looking at decks of Keyforge and saying like, okay, they've got like 15 amber control, okay, that's something. Like you were showing earlier, with your double tribute deck, like it has 15
Hmm.
amber control, seems like a lot. You get rid of the creatures, it's got 0. So things like that, understanding that to me is more important than saying like what's the SAS discrepancy or like what's the amber control in this deck. Like so I personally I would I would avoid looking at SAS. But if someone presents me those two decks, I'm going to be suspicious around 10 or more. But less than
Hmm.
that, probably not.
Interesting. I get very suspicious when the arc scores are very different. Maybe more, maybe less so than that big number. Only because
Yeah.
at the end of the day, I think Saz does a great job of just telling me like how good are the cards in this deck, um,
hmm
and I think it's also, I mean, very good at identifying synergies. But I don't know. Then you get into some philosophical things about would I rather have the pile of good cards or the synergies that may or may not pan out, and yeah, then you start getting into more deep analysis to figure out which one to take for sure. Yeah.
I will say the first week of the ABR playoffs in exchange, my opponent brought, I think they were both AOA, low 60s, which is about like the range that I'd expect for exchange. One of them had a 1.5 creature control score, and the other one
Mm-hmm.
had like probably like 6 to 8. But it had like I think it had a Spirit's Way, it had a Nature's Call and a Glimmer. And so when I looked at those two decks, like just by like the creature count and the creature control alone, I instantly took the one with the higher creature control. Because if you just know that kind of like glaring weakness with like creature control, for example, it's kind of staring you at the face when you look at these matchups when you're evaluating exchange, and that's an easy one to take advantage of. They put a creature down, you fight the creature, and like they can't build a board, they can't clear yours, and the game just kind of runs away. And that's what happened in that first exchange match too. So like you want to know the deck's weaknesses, but that does not mean my weakness is I have no amber control or I have no creature control. Like I think those superficial aspects are not good enough to like take advantage of in exchange or adaptive. Um, I know a lot of people always say like um, playing with no amber control is hard, like, and so I'll bring a deck with no amber control. I don't really think it's that hard to play with no amber control. I think you need to look at like bigger picture strengths and weaknesses of decks when you're evaluating a lineup.
Yeah, I mean, there is something to be said for bringing two decks that, and we're borrowing a lot from Aurora tonight, and a note in the chat, and we should call it too that she does have, or at least at one point had an extension that would hide the big SAS number for you. So, I mean, I love all the other stats in the page too. I love the big number as well, but I do think it can lead to some, yeah, some bias if it's where you go to
Mm-hmm.
first in your own thinking. Um, uh, but there's something to be said for bringing decks that you have an affinity for and saying, well, maybe my opponent just won't have an affinity for these decks. Maybe I've got intuition that leads me down the right paths. And if it's something like low ember control, like maybe it's not a hard thing necessarily to reason through, but it may be a thing that folks aren't feeling right footed about, like they don't have that intuition or affinity for those decks. Like I'll definitely have games with Lorien Il Puro, a very low ember control deck where I'll make a defensive play and then talk to not tonight or one of you sloppy lab workers after and be like, like my man, you don't have time for defense. Like, what are you doing? Like go for it, And as someone, I mean, I play a lot of low ember control decks, but I will like make that mistake, and I think, you know, some folks really like these sharp games. Take borrowing the chess term, where both players are attacking, and others really don't. They'd rather play a more positional match. Um, so I don't know.
Yeah.
It's interesting, but I agree with you in principle. I don't think that's enough to hang your hat on for an adaptive, an exchange lineup in Soul. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think I think that's I've hit on a lot of the stuff I wanted to talk about with exchange this week. But
I think so too.
like you said, it was you had to strike when the iron was hot. Just played the exchange match a couple hours ago versus Dinobot, so it's all fresh in my mind. Would love to play it more if people are ever interested. You know, give us a shout out. Maybe let Time Shapers know that hey, this is a fun lake. Let's bring it back.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah, hopefully ABR keeps it around too.
Yeah, I think it's a great one. I hope ABR does keep it around. I like it. I like that there's a good mix of formats that don't require, you know, the spiciest of the spicy. All the, the four jalapenos on the
Mhm.
spice-o-meter decks.
Yep.
So I think it's great that those are kept in the mix, and even if it's not as strong in terms of maybe accessibility as adaptive best of three, it hits the mark on kind of skill testing nist, but also not requiring those spicy decks, um, which is good too. Yeah.
Yeah,
So
I think it's a very
yeah.
good thing for ABR. I mean, a lot of people end up borrowing decks in ABR, which is it's fine, it's great, it's cool, like to be like a newer player or a smaller collection and be able to play some of these monsters that a lot of the teams have. But it's also good to play your own decks, and I think at least 4 weeks of ABR should be about playing like something of your own deck or maybe field. So exchange hits that, adaptive hits that. Um, I've always wished ABR did Newton as well. I feel like it's a really good format for Newton, like the team format. I really think it would work well. But the ties, no one likes ties.
Ties are tough. Ties are tough. Tough sell. I think it would work out really well as well. So put it. If you're listening to this and you're a fan of Newton, put it in the league feedback form that, if hasn't come out already by the time you're listening to this, probably will before too long. Um, yeah, I think they can make it work. I think we can make it work. A tie counts towards your team score as maybe half point. Or you could figure something out. Do whole points and
Yeah,
double points for a 2-0. I don't know. Um,
yeah, a lot of
yeah,
possibilities.
a lot of possibilities. But definitely well suited for a team format. Cool. Well then.
Yeah, so we're gonna play. I think the matchup that we talked about with your two decks, Deirdre and Green Wasp. If
Mm-hmm.
you can stick around for that, but think this is where the train stops for the audio format.
It does indeed. So I want you all to know that this episode of Bottle the Beaker was brought to you by Academy Training, the ultimate online learning platform for aspiring Archons. With Academy Training, you'll be a master of amber control and tactical maneuvers in no time. Enroll now and take your Crucible game to the next level. Thank you, Academy Training. Folks, we stream Bottom of the Beaker live at 9:30 when the sun is down, Eastern Time. Right here at twitch.tv/sloppylabwork. You can find archives of our past shows over at YouTube. Search for @sloppylabwork there. And for the very best content scraped from the bottom of the beaker after being distilled 57 times. Search for that very phrase, bottom of the beaker, in your podcatcher of choice. And you'll find us there, ready to offer you the choice of 2 decks, one of which is suspiciously lower rated than the other in SAS. Quick Draw, any final words for the folks getting off at the last audio stop?
Thanks for listening this week. Hope you enjoy some exchange and stay sloppy.
Stay sloppy. All right. Kitties are in bed. Let's play a game. I guess we didn't do the debate thing. We were going to do the debate thing. Next time.
I get to surprise you with my choice now.
Okay.
I'm going to go with Green Wasp.
Okay. So we've played this matchup before in exchange.
You and I have?
Mm-hmm.
I didn't remember that. I know I've played with one or both of these decks before, but don't remember which one I picked. Do you remember which one I picked?
I do.
Which one did I pick?
Green Wasp.
At least I'm consistent. Green Wasp is not loaded in my TCO.
Oh no.
So I wonder if you're making this up.
I could
dreamed
be.
it.
I make up a lot of things.
Let's see. Okay, here we go. I can. Good thing I can import it. I know how to do that.
I wonder, maybe I just asked you which you'd play.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, I've watched you play this a few times. It's probably about as fun as Worlds Collide can get. Let's put it that way.
It has creature control.
Exactly.
So we'll see. I'm gonna now that I've said that Deirdre is the favorite, I'm gonna limp to the first tee and say that I haven't played either of these decks in some time. So
All right. Well, I haven't beat you in some time either, so I think you're probably gonna be all right here.
Could be the night. One of the things that I really like about Green Wasp too is that some cards that are typically not very impactful end up being very, very important in lots of matches. And I probably should save that commentary for later. But anyway, hope folks that are sticking around enjoy a match. Thanks for hanging out in the discussion. But yeah, we're going to kick into it and see where things go. I'm playing Deirdre Vence Rook. Very cool triple lab work. Spirit's Way, Martyr's End, Epic Quest deck, and quick draws on my Green Wasp, the Fist of the Rock. Double Tribute, double Six Semper shenanigans. Yeah.
Good stuff.
Good stuff.
Yeah, I think I am. Don't like this one. I'm kind of the appeal of Green Wasp to me is like the Tribute Six Semper combo. It seems pretty reliable, and there's very little amber control in Deirdre, which makes me feel like, yeah, I can do this.
Right on. All right. Good luck and have fun.
Good luck, have fun.
I'm not gonna be salty, so I'm gonna kick things off with a lab work. Surprise, surprise.
It's not sloppy enough.
Throw a card in the old archives.
Ended up with a pretty solid mulligan hand here.
That's not bad. That's not bad at all. Okay.
All right. Start the quest early.
Draw some cards. Quick draw. Do your worst. Oh my goodness.
Oh, yeah. Well, Do you have anything that can reap out of hand? Does not appear so, unless I'm missing something, but no dis reaping for you.
Dis reaps. Okay, this is looking grim all of a sudden. Well,
Is that all it takes to look grim?
it's looking grim. Let's do this guy.
Solid?
And yes, I am sure.
Okay. What are you holding then, sir?
I am innocent over here, an innocent
I don't.
man.
I don't. Oh, the Epic Quest. Gotcha. That is an annoying prompt, isn't it?
Yeah. Oh yeah, yeah. Every turn, it's gonna be yeah.
I feel like you probably know enough about programming TCO to turn off the Epic Quest prompt. Like, are you sure you want to end your turn, even though you did not play 7 Sanctum cards? Like, you could turn that off, and you would not hurt the experience, in my opinion.
It's you could, but it's a fine line between I mean, it's a fine line between uh you start streamlining these things, and then all of a sudden you get into making decisions for the player territory, you know?
Yeah. Oh, this is such a gorgeous, gorgeous thing happening here.
This is terrible. This is terrible.
And I don't think you have any artifact control, so might as well use that guy. And just for good measure, your dis can once again not reap.
Yeah, seems good. Yeah, the Pocket Universe is definitely one of the cards that often comes up being very strong um, in this deck.
Especially with
Okay,
the Gatekeeper.
especially with the Gatekeeper. Yeah, Gatekeeper, or Gatekeeper against Gatekeeper or Doorstep or something. Yeah. All right, so we're gonna Hysteria, make your hand even bigger, and probably be walking into a Tribute 6 Semper here. But what are you gonna do? Am I done? Should I use this Epic Quest?
Epic Quest? You might want to. All right. Just get right back into it. Did you notice what I had under the Jargogle?
I did. The Power of Fire. Look at that.
Good stuff.
Yeah, it's not bad to have under there. Not a bad thing to have under there. You could cash in on a Titan Guardian on a Logos turn, even if I didn't have
Yeah.
anything great to fight it off with.
Hmm. No disreaps.
Had a feeling. Had a feeling. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't be that sad about a Spirit's Way here.
Yeah, I'm sure not. So this is interesting. Did you reshuffle? No, you didn't reshuffle.
I just haven't played anything. All creatures.
What? Get out of here. Did you reshuffle?
No, I played no actions, no Tau Tau Vapors. I've called Logos every single turn this game.
Holy moly. 20 cards, though. So this is interesting. I have some cool decisions to make.
5 archives already. How'd you get 5 archives?
Just archiving like a fiend over here. Um.
Oh, I see. Yeah.
Hmm. That is one spicy board. I have some cool options. I really do. Oh, that's funny. So, Uh, uh, I'm going to this house. Do I want to be locked into? But do I want to be locked into my next 2 turns? Hmm. Okay, I am going to take my archives. I'm going to play this Binate Rupture.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to put Streak in the center of my battle line. I'm going to play Lab Work and Archive Ortanu's Binding. And I'm going to go against what I said before and use this Life Ward now.
Okay.
And the reason is I have the highest powered creature at the moment, and I'd rather that not change.
Yeah.
So you'll be able to tribute, but you have to do some work if you want a 6 Emperor.
Yeah. Well, that makes this decision a lot easier. Just gonna reap. Gonna reap. Yeah. Let's Tau. Hmm. Let's Tau again. What is going on here?
Well, you click in that creature, but it won't let you do anything but discard. It's because of the. It's because of the.
No, I can't draw any
Life
good
Ward.
cards.
How many babbling
Universe.
bibliophile reaps have you had? Come on.
I've had, I think, 5 this game.
My gosh.
Hmm. Might be time. Might be time. Okay, so we're going to stop you from reaping with this.
Sensible. Sensible.
Draw a
Sensible.
few. Draw a few more.
That was a good fight.
I'm really curious what the heck is happening with these draws right now.
The TCO hacks.
Something like that. Man, that's weird.
Well, I really wish I still had that Titan Guardian. Or Titan Mechanic? Yeah. Then Prince Derek would hit for full value, which would be pretty cool. And I would be at check plus. But alright, 7 Sanctum cards incoming. Let's see. Let's do our taunts sensibly. Baron Mengvin. I guess I could have taunted this duder. Maybe that's just better. Yeah. To the left, we're also going to taunt Merrick. Throw some more duders over here. And no, my turn's not done. I'll forge that key.
All right.
Yeah.
This is interesting. So Maruk Baron, okay. Got rid of both of your Spirit's Ways
Would
and your
have
Hysteria.
loved to hold one. Would have loved to hold
I
one.
bet you would have. Interesting. You do have a Cull of the Weak, a Grey Rider, but you ain't killing anything.
Nope.
I don't know if that matters, though. This is a really tough call for me here. You do have a Charette coming, but that is all your creature control, your Amber control. Hmm. Well, now. Let's have some fun, right?
I like it.
Oh, can I take my archives, actually?
Sure.
Just, I'm not going to use those cards this turn, but I don't want you,
Don't feel like getting Desaniad.
don't feel like getting to Saniad.
Okay, I'll pretend not to have seen those. Yeah.
Yeah, you can see them. What am I going to do with a volcano and a barn raising with no Brobnar creatures on board?
Drawn so many cards.
Oh my god.
I'm gonna laugh when the tributes are both bottom of four.
Yeah, you're not alone in that regard.
Oh, funny.
And no Disreaps.
No disreaps. Yeah, it still makes sense.
Yep. I like to draw a Logos card. Low Quant.
Quant's good.
Interesting. Interesting.
One,
I
two.
still have yet to call any house besides Logos this game.
Uh-huh.
Have you done that before?
I don't think so. I've definitely had games where the bibliophiles sat for a while and I got to call Logos a lot, but I haven't had that quite that much. Okay, so this is very interesting. So you'd need double tribute to stop 10, or we have one power fire gone. Imperial
Maybe
Forge.
this is the time that you fight off those bibliophiles.
Maybe. I mean, you'd need tribute plus. Or tribute plus Thero would do it too. I mean, where is a martyr's end when a boy needs a martyr's end? You know? Hmm. Okay, we are going Sanctum.
Mm-hmm.
No on the archives. We are gonna reap to 10. Grey Rider comes down, captures 1. Now I've got this Barrister Joya. Barrister Joya, are you better
Where was
stopping?
T earlier on?
Right? Yeah, that's kind of the answer to the quants in the bibliophiles.
Yeah.
There's 2 of them, I think. 2 of them? Yeah. But now I have to decide if Joy is better off stopping Reaps or capturing on Baron Mengvin. That is a good question. I don't think you can go Logos again. That feels like losing.
It would be a great story,
Yeah.
but
Well,
it
you need
also is.
Quant into Tribute, and then Jargoggles hiding like Thero would do it, I guess.
Ooh, that would be spicy.
But I think we're discarding the spare and capturing.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yep. Saurian.
Checks out. And there's Pterodactyl. Cool.
Oh,
Another.
whoops. Yeah, I kind of messed that up. All right.
You
Before I
switch
mess it up
something up?
any further. Oh, it is what it is. Um,
Mm-hmm. Ooh. Okay. Cool.
got the library under him.
Jargoggle playing. Ooh, okay. Okay. And a Thero. Nice. And an Imperium. Oh no. Oh no. And an Imperial Forge? Oh dear.
All
That
right.
is bad news. That's bad news.
And let's hit the hack, I think, and stop Sanctum from reaping.
Yeah, seems legit. Uh-huh. Well, now. No six Sempers, huh?
I could not draw them for the life of me. It was insane.
Oh, funny. Uh,
I wanted them so bad too.
Now what do I do?
Well, you probably play your charrette.
Don't have a charrette.
Oh, I guess you lose then.
I can stop you in. I still stop you in Dis or Sanctum. Um, yeah, but the outs after that don't look great.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, let's go Sanctum. um, Fight there. Discard Joya. Oof. Oof, I say. Big oof.
Mm. Okay, so do I want to call Brobnar for fun?
Just for the funsies.
Yeah, I think so. It looks pretty fun to me.
Nice.
Start things off with a volcano, I think. Yeah,
So
let's play a volcano. Play a barn
hmm.
raisin. Let's play Berserker Slam, which is easily the best Worlds Collide Brobnar card. Such a good card.
It's very good.
I think I have enough. Yeah, I got enough here.
Oof. Here come the bros.
And here come the bros.
Here come the bros. All right. Well, I have nothing to do except for go out in a blaze of glory, so I'm gonna do that. Archive this thing, and Isania for spite.
Yeah,
Ooh, GG. Well played.
GG. That's my first win against you in a while. It must be just. I think it's just my lucky night. Honestly, things have fallen my way tonight, so
Maybe
needed that
exchange
one.
is just your format. I don't know.
I like to think that I got second in the Time Shapers Exchange League, um, so done well with it. It's been fun. Um, I've enjoyed it, and like we talked about, it's a pretty complex format. And if you're going to go into it casually, I think it's probably going to be super hard and brain burny, and you may not come back to it.
Hmm.
But if you enjoy that kind of thing and you want to play with some weird decks and you know the matchups, then it's a lot of fun.
So for this matchup, any kind of like thoughts in retrospect? Did it play out the way that you thought it did? Did it? Was there anything about the
Um,
matchup that surprised you? Yeah.
I did not think I'd go into Logos 7 times in a row. Um, and I also didn't think that I would do that and never draw the 6 Emperors until right now.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I did not think that you would burn through your creature control so fast. I totally understand why you did. I don't. I don't think it was a misplay. Like you needed that key. If you could have threatened check a little bit earlier, like with after the epic quest, if you had one pip in hand, or if you had the Martyr's End, like that's a pretty big game changer.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean,
Um,
the Marta's End earlier, I think, would have been tough to deal with for sure. Um,
yeah,
Interesting. I mean, yeah, and,
it
and I
took.
mean, an early Joya could have been interesting too, but then maybe you move through your cards and find the 6 Emperors sooner. It's like hard to say.
I don't know. Like I drew 4 cards every single turn with the bibliophiles. That's better than I would have done
Hmm.
playing the other houses.
Sure.
Um, Yeah, I think if you had the Joya out, that's obviously a game changer. I would have had to go into Brobnar earlier. I did have the Axiom early. Um, I was pretty happy that I didn't have to use it. Um,
Mm-hmm.
so I think if the Joya came out, I probably would have gone into Brobnar a bit sooner. But I was sitting on the second Power of Fire for a while as well. Um, yeah, I did have answers. When you burst it up to 11, I could have taken a lot of it out, but like I think we talked earlier about like playing with low amber control, and Green Wasp doesn't have low amber control, but if you're playing any game really, it's not so important to take them off the first key. Like you had 11, and I was like, it's fine. Like I could go into Brobnar and take out like 4 of that, I think, with a Power of Fire. But like, okay, like I could do that now, or I could do that later. Like, what's the difference?
Sure.
So I wasn't too concerned about that. I thought the drawing 4 and reaping for 5, I think it was that turn, was a better play.
Yeah, yeah. No, I think you played it well. And the artifacts in Green Wasp actually, I feel like, do a lot of work. Like the Seismo Entangler very often is
Mm.
relevant. The Pocket Universe very often is relevant. So it was cool. Cool to see it come together.
Uh, did it mess up your dis at all? Because like Tesmal was super scary. I mean, Tesmal can take away a lot, I think, from this, and so I was pretty happy to not ever let Tesmal reap.
Yeah. I mean, I would have loved to reap with Tesmal. Um, I mean, early on, it probably would have just been okay, do something other than Logos. But at the end, uh, I mean, I would have loved to stop you from calling Saurian or Brobnar at key moments for sure.
Yeah, like taking away Saurian, for example. even with quant, like I could go into a tribute if I wanted, but like it wouldn't have been very powerful with a small board like that. So I would have been relying on like a power of fire for just a couple. Like I think I had a way to make Garon Nine Toes a 9 power,
Mm.
and so make you lose 4 with power of fire. But like, I mean that's not bad, but it's not as good as 2 tributes and a Scudam.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. With the hysteria gone. Oof.
Yeah. Um, were you surprised I went straight back to logos
I mean, no. If
after?
you got the bibliophiles, you can take advantage of them as long as you can, for sure.
Yeah.
After the hysteria, you mean? No.
Yeah, right after the hysteria, I just played 5 logos creatures for not much value, and then the Seismo Tangler was it.
No, I mean, I think the hysteria was clearly a sign of weakness. Like, I would love to not play it then. Um,
Hmm.
so that was kind of like, I can't deal with this logos board. So putting it right back out made a lot of sense.
If I So the turn that I fought with both of my Titan Guardians to draw an extra 4 into your mechanic, if I did not fight with them, would you have played the Spirit's Way the next turn?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. But I would have also forged for one less and gotten
Mm-hmm.
3 from Prince Derek. So I've been +4 Amber coming out of
Oh
that
wow.
turn. Yeah.
Damn, that would have been the difference. The Prince Derek, if I had not killed that. So
Yeah. Yeah. He was my last, the Titan mechanic was my last logos creature. So yeah, I would have been,
hmm.
I have to double check the Amber total at 8, 8, 9. Because you guys, I passed that turn at 5.
Yeah.
So passing at
Yeah.
9 for check at 9 for the third key um, would have been pretty good.
You were
Mm.
right about the Epic Quest being almost automatic in there. That was
It's pretty
pretty
consistent.
easy.
I want to
Yeah.
say, I mean, that one came together very well. I want to say it hits 70% of the games. And one of the reasons why I like this deck is I think it does take familiarity with the deck to um, understand how good or not good the Epic Quest is and when to abandon it. Um,
I think
so
that's true in a lot of Epic Quest decks.
yeah, yeah. Although where that balance point is, yeah, yeah, for sure. Yeah, totally, totally. But yeah, it's not hard to put together. Not hard to put together in this deck.
Yeah. Cool matchup. Good choices, I think.
Cool matchup. Well chosen, I guess, and well played. And well played. Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
well, like I said, things are falling my way tonight. I should go buy a lottery ticket
There
before it
you
hits midnight.
there you go.
Yeah. All
All
right,
right.
man. Well, thanks for the chat. Thanks for the game. Good time as always.
Good time as always. And yeah, yep. Thanks to chat for hanging out. I guess we'll sign off. And that was a lot of fun. So see you around the lab.
Yeah. We'll see you next week. Or maybe tomorrow. Yeah, you never know.
We'll see.